Let's talk about fonts and video game credit pages. This is a LudoKit devlog, so everything I show you here is subject to change. But this is giving you an idea of what the problem is and the current draft of how LudoKit is trying to solve it. So, credits. Credits are an interesting problem in video games for a whole bunch of reasons. On the font side, we have the normal challenge you always have with a video game, which is when you localize it, you probably need at least some different set of fonts for any languages that you're localizing into that use different writing systems. The classic one you're always going to deal with is CJK, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. Those require large fonts. They have some overlaps. They often require different fonts, and those likely have a different font from something like Russian. So this is a classic problem you always have to deal with in video games anyway. You have to deal with it on a credits page too, because your credits page has localized stuff in it, like headings, role names, stuff that will match the language that the game is currently set to. And that'll probably be using the same set of fonts that the rest of your game is. However, names on a credits page are not localized, meaning they're the same no matter what the language of the game is in. But they might represent a bunch of different locales anyway, but all at the same time. So the game might be set to English, but it'll still have names that could be in Chinese, Russian, English, etc. So it creates this really tricky scenario of trying to make sure you know which fonts you're going to need for every single name that you're trying to render in your credits, as well as knowing which fonts to use kind of globally for each language the game is in for your localized stuff. So that's the problem we're dealing with. It's a nightmare. Here's how LudoKit tries to help you solve it. So first, we've got a font library. So here you can upload the fonts that you use for your game, just kind of as a collection of fonts, so that everybody on your team knows what fonts are available, what fonts are used by the game for your promo materials, for the actual in-game stuff, whatever. So you got your fonts here, so that LudoKit has access to them, and you can see you've got a sort of toggleable display of approximate language support. So this is not necessarily exactly a number that is that meaningful, right? Because what does it mean to cover 98% of German, right? Are you using 98% of German characters? Probably not. So this is just to give you a rough idea of which of your fonts support which of your languages. And so this is set up to kind of show you truly excellent. So this is 100% coverage all the way down to probably fine, but starting to get risky, down to this like 94% kind of range. And anything else that's lower than that just gets cut off because it is very likely not going to support your actual text. So you can kind of use this to already get a sense of what fonts you're going to need for the human names that are showing up in your credits, as well as for the actual languages that you're translating your game into. And you can plop sample text into here to actually see what it's going to look like, and to get a quick view of stuff that isn't covered. So that's your kind of big picture font management of identifying the fonts that you want to and can use in kind of a broad way. Within your credits page, though, you need to be able to deal with it on a per name basis. You need to be able to tell, oh, I thought my fonts were fine, but now a new name has appeared that uses a character that isn't in the fonts that I specified. And so you need to be able to detect that stuff, and ideally, well before you discover it in game, downstream in some QA tester or something like that. You want to discover it when it's cheap and easy to deal with. So here I've got this sample set of names from all over the world, covering lots of different writing systems. So you can see how this works in LudoKit for the credits manager. So we've got this new section up here, this credits fonts, where we can see in this case, I've configured this How Many Dudes game to have all of these target languages for the game. So these are basically the game languages you can think of as like, that's the global switch, right? So if the game is set to Chinese, that means everything is being rendered, all of the content is localized into simplified Chinese. But again, the human names are not localized. They just are in whatever language they're in, and they'll state that way. So you've got toggles here to basically preview what your credits are going to look like and where the issues are for each of the different languages that your game supports. So then for each language, you can say, hey, let's specify what fonts I want to use. So basically the default is whatever your game's default language is. And this is the fallback for all the other languages if you don't specify them. And within that, then there's just this base style, which is if all else fails, the cascade, like or if all else isn't specified, then this is your font that gets used. And so that means you can just use one set of fonts if you want to, one just base fonts for everything, but you can also get more specific. So let's set a font here just so we got something. Let's choose Yanon Cafisats. This is a classic one we used to use in a lot of our games. So I added this font, and all of a sudden, we went from everything seeming fine to having tons of errors, right? And you can see right here, it says, hey, your fonts don't cover all the glyphs that you need. So, and you can see errors on every single language. So let's scroll down real quick just so you can see what this is talking about. So first you'll observe that, hey, this name is now in Yanon Cafisats, right? So this is giving you rendering so you can quickly scan to see what fonts all of your names are showing up in. If we scroll down some more, we start running into trouble. Hey, there's missing glyphs in this font for this. What is this? I know what this is. I can't remember. Anyway, so for these different languages. And that makes sense, right? Because the font that I picked is this like pretty Latin alphabet specific font. So this lets you know just right out of the gate, hey, I don't have the fonts I need to handle all of the names that I have to render in my credits. And so we can add a fallback font. So let's go with something that's likely has pretty good coverage. So right, the coverage estimates here for whatever language is currently selected. So that's still English, right? So this doesn't really give me a good idea of like what this means for a Hebrew name or something. But we'll pick some like a Ubuntu regular, probably has pretty good coverage for stuff. You can see now I can change the priority list here. So whichever one is first is going to be the one, if it supports a name, that's the one that'll get used, and otherwise it'll keep going down the list. So, hey, there's my two fonts. Now if I go down, I can still see, hey, this still says, this is still in Yanon Cafisats, so that's good. Scroll down some more, and hey, this name, which used to have an error, now is rendering in Ubuntu, so you can see it looks totally different, right? So of course you're going to want to choose fonts that can go together when they're mixed together for different people, or ideally a font that everybody can use, but that's pretty hard to find. And of course there's still a bunch of fonts that are, or still a bunch of names that are missing support from fonts. So we could add in some more. We could go pop in a Japanese font and a simplified Chinese font and a traditional Chinese font and this is a Korean font, but I don't think I actually have a license to use it, so I'm not going to show it here. So save all of that, and you can see we still got errors. So we haven't solved them all yet, and you can see there's still a bunch left. Hey, Korean's still missing. We've got Thai still missing. So that's exactly what we would expect, given the fonts that we have. So you can basically keep on adding fonts until you have covered all of your bases, and you would be able to just scroll through here and see that they all are rendered. And so now you can see these are being rendered properly, and we've got everything we need. So eventually, once you've covered all of the names that show up, then that error will go away. And depending on the actual localized stuff. So again, this is just about names right now, right? But credits pages also have roles, and they have discipline headings, and they have other kinds of headings as well, right? That stuff is localized, and so it may turn out to be the case that once you solve your names problem, that you still have, now my Chinese version of the game doesn't have the font it needs to support the translated headings, right? And so on. So this lets you fully manage by language and by sort of style or the text type what your fonts are, what your fallbacks, and everything inherits, so that things will just kind of fall back down the cascade, so you don't have to necessarily re-specify everything everywhere. So that's the idea. This is the first draft of this thing. It seems to be working pretty well. The stuff that's missing right now, though, is the dealing with the same stuff, but for the localization side. So like I said, this is all focused on just the human names right now, which is the trickier problem. The next thing that I'll be doing is getting this set up for the translated side, because LudoKit is going to be providing pre-localized role names, because it provides a set of role names for you. So if I go like open something up, and I go look at roles, then I've got this role list that is predefined in LudoKit, which means that we can also pre-translate it for you in the the most popular languages. So once I have that, then I'll also know, because I have all of your roles that you specified for all of the people who are in your credits, and I have them all localized, which means I can also do a scan to find out for each of the languages that your game is going to be rendering in. I can then scan all of the roles that you're actually using and all of the disciplines that those roles fall into to ask, do all of the characters across all of those things, are they all covered by your font selection? And if not, then I can tell you that. So that's the next step for this, and all of that is preparation for the final bit of all of it, which is to have something you can export. So right now, credits are just being collected, and now you can start specifying fonts. It can check for some errors, but you can't actually pull this data out of here yet. So the final part of this whole thing for this credits manager is to have basically an export button that'll give you a well-structured set of data that has all of your credits, it has all of your headings, it basically has everything in it, including references to all of the fonts that you're using, so that when you then go to actually use it in game to render stuff, you can mostly just iterate over this well-described data structure and then just see the fonts that it says it needs to use, switch to that font while you're rendering, and not have to do any of that logic in game. And ultimately, since it is just a well-described data structure, you can still decide how you want to render it. If you don't like the order that stuff comes in from LudoKit, you can change the order. If you don't want to show certain things, you can just not show those things. If you want to completely reorganize it and group things a different way, you can do all that too, because ultimately LudoKit's trying to do the hard part for you of getting all of the localization and collection and font stuff dealt with and give you a good baseline set that has things in a reasonable order and grouped in a reasonable way and basically all dealt with so that you can just use it, but you always have the option as you're implementing the final thing to render however you want to. So that's where this is at, and that's what's coming next. I hope that was interesting and useful, and happy to get your feedback. You can hop into the LudoKit Discord to let me know what you think, and you can find that at ludokit.com. Goodbye.